Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please join us on the main stage, sponsored by Capital Area District Libraries, for Jason Howard Artist Spotlight with Chris Banzai and Randy from Comics Community Podcast.
All right. You can hear the crowd. You can hear the stampede of people. How's it going, everybody? Hi. You guys having a good con? Very cool, very cool. Yes, this is nice. Capital Area, or Capital City Comic-Con, second year. Nice crowd, very good turnout. I'm here with Jason Howard. Thanks for joining us. Awesome. Well, what I'd like to do, Jason, is just talk to you for a little bit and then open it up for questions to the crowd. But first and foremost, I've seen you around town. Are you from this area?
Yeah, I grew up in the area and live here now. So I grew up over in Perry, for anyone who's familiar with the area. The giant metropolis of Perry.
Yeah.
And I've been in the area all my life and lived in Chicago for a little bit when I was going to college, but came back here and my kids go to school in Holt, and so just part of the community. And one of the great things, living in the time we do now is I can work with, like on Trees, Warren lives in England, the publisher Image is based in San Francisco. I work with Robert, who's been in Kentucky and LA, and really the restrictions we used to have on having to live in New York City to work in comics are all gone. You can, live anywhere, work anywhere, and it really kind of opens a lot of doors that would have been closed 20, 30 years ago for, people living in this area.
Yeah, we're super happy to have you in this area. I know I've seen you at Summit Comics, I think it was Clem's at the time, and you've been there to help sign for Free Comic Book Day and joining us for that event. That's been a lot of fun in the past. So right now you just mentioned Trees, and we also know you from The Astounding Wolfman.
Yep.
Also Super Dinosaur.
Yep.
So, and those are through Image, right? So have you primarily worked with Image Comics then?
Yeah, I've done some, way back in the day I did stuff for other smaller publishers, and but really kind of got started in more mainstream kind of comics when I started working with Robert Kirkman. We met and kind of hit it off, and it was early in his career, so it was before he was quite the well-known sort of Walking Dead creator that he is now. And we did a comic together and realized we liked working with each other and liked a lot of the same stuff, and out of that came The Astounding Wolfman, which was a series we did.
Right.
And I drew 25 issues of that with Robert, and then again, we really get along pretty well. So in the process of doing Wolfman, we came up with the idea for Super Dinosaur, and that led into that series with him as well.
Right, and so
Robert already had a relationship with Image, and because I really like creating my own stuff and doing books where I'm not just drawing a thing, I'm coming up with the idea and working with the writer to develop this world and characters and designs, and Image is a great place for that, where they publish it, but Robert and I own the actual characters and property ourselves.
Okay, so the two of you?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've got Astounding Wolfman and Super Dinosaur Volume 1 of the trades up on screen there, so everyone can check it out. Now, so you were just talking about how the two of you work together a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that collaboration is like?
Yeah, it's kind of probably like kind of collaborate with anyone. We talk about stuff. We're like, oh yeah, that's cool, or this would be cool. For example, with Super Dinosaur, my son at the time was in preschool, and if you've ever been around kids and you're an artist, they like to consider themselves as art directors. So they're like, Daddy, draw this. Daddy, draw that. So I'm like, you're getting this for free. I would normally charge people for these drawings. So he sort of art directed me into drawing a T-Rex with Batman's gear on him, basically.
As a child would?
Yes, it seems kind of perfect. And I was like, what should we name him? He's like, Super Dinosaur. I'm like, oh, that's pretty funny. And then I was talking to Robert later that day, and I showed him the drawing, and he's like, get rid of the Batman gear and give him big robot arms, but controlled with little joysticks with his useless T-Rex arms. So we're sort of giving the useless T-Rex arms a purpose now. And I thought that was genius. And so we did some drawings, and then we started kicking around ideas of what the world would be like, and I would throw in things and he would throw in things, and like sometimes you do if you're kind of creative and coming up with stories, and then we just made it. So it was really a lot of fun, and then it's probably the project I've done where I've been most me as far as like working with a writer, but still it has a lot of the characters I came up with, a lot of the situations were based on things I developed, and we kind of jam on it together.
Awesome. So Astounding Wolfman.
Yes.
How did that start?
Robert and I had worked together, and we wanted to do a book, and he had an idea. He really wanted to do kind of a werewolf. He thought something would be cool, like a werewolf superhero. Try to find a bridge between superhero and horror kind of things.
Okay.
And it skews a little more towards the superhero side, but it's basically what if Batman were a werewolf.
Nice.
Is kind of the concept.
Nice.
And then takes it from there, and lots of twists and turns, and Robert really likes big cliffhangery stuff in his stories, so there's a lot of cliffhanger twists and turns to the story.
So thinking about going from Astounding Wolfman to Super Dinosaur, now into Trees, if you look at those titles, all next to each other, your style has sort of, I don't know if it's intentional on your part or if it's just part of the way that you've evolved and progressed, but you can tell it looks like you, but there's definitely different flavors. Do you do that intentionally?
Yeah,
or?
Both. Just drawing, hopefully you get better over time. And then also, like when I'm drawing, like that's my job. So I'm drawing all day, every day. And so you just want to try new things so you don't get bored. So a lot of it is inking tools. So I can look at issues of Wolfman and be like, these 5 issues I was inking with this kind of brush, and then I got bored of it and I switched to these pens, and then I got tired of this method and I tried this working method. So some of it is just growing and experimenting, and then some is sort of intentional for the book. So for example, when I started Trees, it's a much more grounded story than Super Dinosaur or Wolfman. And Warren, I had read the first 3 scripts before I started, so I really knew the kind of story Warren was telling, and the world is very kind of broken and cracked and gritty, and I wanted something where the line work felt gritty and broken, and so I started inking with pens and much more sketchier and looser to try to capture the tone of the story, and it didn't feel that like a slick superhero looking line would fit the kind of story that he was telling in Trees. And then again, for me it was really exciting because all my inking styles before that had been very clean. So on Trees, to try something that was very loose and expressive, was a lot of learning for me. So it felt like I was kind of, I don't know, not that I wasn't having fun before, but you're in that nervous, having fun place where you don't know how it's going to look, and it's kind of all exciting and new. So
it's gorgeous, I have to say. I mean, it just has this real graphic quality feel to it at times that I love. It's a great style.
Thank you.
So talking about Trees now.
Right.
Okay, so you're doing this with Warren Ellis.
Yep.
First of all, can you tell us about what is for those of us that haven't read it? Can you kind of give us the premise about Trees?
Sure. Trees is, I explain it as the quiet aftermath of an alien invasion. So these giant pillars from space land on the planet, and you think it's going to be an action movie, but there is no aliens coming out, we can't get into them, and they just sit there and do nothing. And so the story starts 10 years after this event, where these things are here, but they're not really actively doing anything that we know of. And so life goes on, but just their presence has maybe affected the world in some way. And the story is like a character drama that takes place in the shadow, where people live basically in towns or cities where one of these trees has landed. And it's kind of a study of their life and how it's affected by the tree or not affected. And then the overarching story of maybe something is creepy happening with the trees kind of undercurrents the whole thing. So maybe the HBO drama version versus the action movie version of that kind of story.
Is that a subtle hint, Jason?
No, I wish.
If anyone's listening, this would make a really great series. Hint, hint.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So talk about you talked about how your collaboration with Robert worked out on the previous books.
Right.
Is it the same with Warren? Did you guys come up with this idea together, or how did you guys connect on this premise?
Sure. Warren and I were doing a webcomic together called Scatterlands.
Scatterlands.
Yeah, and that was really fun, and Warren was one of my favorite writers, so I kind of reached out to him, and we had this idea and kind of came up with Scatterlands. And then I had a break in my schedule, so I was like, hey, let's do a real comic, as he called it, a proper comic. And so really it was kind of funny. He's like, well, he said, send me a list of what music you like, what books you've read recently, and what movies you like, and what you want to draw. So I sent him a list of those things, and he came back with the idea of trees, which I thought was brilliant.
Really?
And one of the things I said as far as drawing is I was really into drawing like environments and locations, and I didn't want to draw the same thing over and over. So the story of trees is structured where you follow a couple different plot lines in very specific real locations, one in Italy, one in China, one in New York, and so I had a chance to really vary kind of location and do a lot of research on what this town in Italy looks like, and to kind of draw that, which then is very different from this desert city in China or New York City. So it was really fun how he took kind of the stuff I want to draw and was into,
right,
and then turned it into actual plot structure stuff within the story to accommodate that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's fascinating. So he got some information from you to figure out, as a writer, what would, and as an artist, what would you want to then draw,
right,
and then
yeah,
crafted the idea around that.
Yeah.
So that must make it super fun to work on.
Yeah, it is, and it's really, like with Super Dinosaur, a lot of the characters and story ideas I came up with, working with Robert, we'd pitch it back and forth. With Trees, the story stuff is Warren, but he's sort of taking what he knows I like to draw and filtering it through that. And then so it's a different kind of involvement for me, where it's like I'm excited to get a new issue script just because I want to know, I know generally where it's going, but the specifics of how we get there is really exciting for me to see that, and then kind of slow down and think about, all right, how do I draw this and how do I make it look as cool as possible?
Yeah. So on the screen here we have the covers of Volume 1 in trade paperback, which you can get today.
Yep.
Volume 2 is right next to it. That's
Yep.
coming out
soon. I just approved it for print last week, so it should be in stores in the next month or so.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, Jason, can you give us a little bit of a clue about what's coming up next for Trees? A little exclusive action?
Warren has plans for Volume 3, and we will probably be starting that sometime in 2017. He wants to take a little break between Volumes 2 and 3, and if you read Volume 2 at the end, you get a little tease of maybe what characters and where the story direction will be going in Volume 3. So
very cool.
In between Trees Volume 2 and 3, I'm working on a top secret project that I can't talk about. Sorry.
Come on. Pretty please?
No.
No hints. Darn it.
hints.
Darn it. Is it with Image? Can you even say that?
I can't, but
Can't say that.
probably.
Probably, if history is to give us any clues. Okay, so we talked about what's next. Does anyone from the audience have questions for Jason? Anyone?
You can use a microphone if you want.
Yeah.
That's
Step forward. Okay, well, so let's talk a little bit more about let's take it way back.
Yeah.
How did you get into comics? Can you talk about, for those of us out in the audience who may be interested in eventually someday being a comic book artist?
Yeah, I guess, are there people in the audience who like to draw or are interested in comics or writing or art?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as a kid, probably like most kids, I drew all the time, and I grew up actually on a farm. So like there were no like kids nearby, so I didn't have anybody to play with. And you know, my parents were a little strict with TV time stuff. So while we had a TV, it was not a huge part of my life as far as being able to like sit around and watch it all the time. And video games were much, you know, you can only play so much Atari before you're like, all right, I'm done with that. So really, you know, drawing was a big part of my life growing up, and my parents always thought, well, he likes to draw, and I always like to draw mechanical things too. So they're like, oh, he'll probably be an engineer or draw cars or something. But the more I learned about that, I'm like, I want to like draw a cool thing. I don't want to like draw gears and like boring stuff of how that thing works. Like I want to draw a spaceship, like, you know.
Yeah.
And then I was always writing and reading and stuff too. So comics really appealed to me because one, I can draw cool stuff, and for the story, it's real. Like when you're reading the story, that spaceship or that robot dinosaur is real in the context of the story, and I can focus on the fun, cool bits and not have to worry about the underneath boring stuff of how it actually works. And then the story element appealed to me, where you can create and write stories, and you're not just doing a drawing for the sake of a drawing, a comic page. You're doing lots of drawings that tell a story, so it kind of takes some of the pressure off having to have like a perfect piece of artwork, where you have like several images that create this story, and I don't know, it really appeals to kind of the storytelling side.
Yeah.
So as I got older and got into comics more, I just sort of kept drawing, or a lot of my friends who drew when I was younger stopped and didn't draw anymore. And it's one of those things that, you know, if you draw for 20 years regularly, suddenly you're much better at it than you used to be. So I'm sure there's some talent in there somewhere, but, you know, it really is a thing where as you practice, you can really take, you know, just a moderate amount of talent and interest and really develop that into a skill where you're able to do something creative and, you know, be able to kind of utilize that, you know, for me as my job. Like that's how I make my living, is drawing comics.
Right. That's fantastic. So you were talking about story. Will we be seeing anything coming from you in the future, maybe about where you actually write and draw?
Yeah, I've got a couple projects that I'm writing and drawing myself.
Awesome.
And actually, I have one I can't talk about specifics,
I'm
but
trying,
I'm actually,
guys. I'm trying.
you know, have the whole first issue drawn, and at some point I'll have enough done where it can come out. I drew a book a few years ago, and I partnered with a friend of mine to do a book called Sea Bear and Grizzly Shark.
Yeah.
And I wrote and drew half of that, and he wrote and drew the other half. But it is something that I'd like to get into at least as a part of my career, as a project where I'm kind of the sole creator. It's a different process when you're writing yourself. You know, part of the fun with working with a writer is sort of jumping off of ideas. Like, I bring this, and he's like, but what about that? I'm like, oh yeah, but what about that? And you end up at a place that's different than you would on your own. So that's really fun and kind of pushes you in different places. But sometimes it's fun too to be able to just sit down and be like, this whole thing is mine, and this whole thing is like my idea, and every page I'm trying to make something I want to draw, and it's just a different type of creative experience. So I would like to do a couple projects like that and see how that goes.
Yeah, cool. Sort of universe building and all of that.
Yep.
Nice.
Really dig into some of that stuff.
Yeah. So can you tell us about, you know, from a visual storytelling perspective, is there anything you can share with us about how you bring in story into the pictures on a panel?
Yeah, I really spend a lot of time doing like rough little sketches and thumbnails just to figure out how visually to tell a story. And, you know, like working on trees, sometimes it's a matter of bringing in a human element. There's a sequence in trees, I think it's maybe issue 11 or 12, where we're in New York City and it's flooded from when the tree landed. There's all this devastation. So there's a section of the city where the water comes up like maybe the first two stories of buildings. And so people have turned that area of the city into like this, I don't know, kind of ghetto war zone where, instead of instead of cars on the streets, there's boats and different things. And so the police are patrolling that area. And he has like 3 pages where there's just shots of the city. And it's really cool because it gives you a sense of what that environment is like now. But I didn't feel like there was any sort of narrative to pull me through. So what I did to try to, and there's no words, it's just wordless images. So what I did to try to bring a little bit of story is at the beginning we see these 2 policemen down by the water and they're carrying this cart with a little robot on it. Then they put the robot in the water. It's just like a little bubble like robot. Maybe it's like a water drone in my mind. If it was like that, the police would monitor it with these little, swimming drones that would float around. And then in the shots, we see this drone sort of going through the city. So I'm putting in all the shots Warren asked for. I want to see this, I want to see this. But we're following narratively this little, boat drone as it goes through the area. And whether people actively notice that or not, for me, it makes a little story element. For this sequence, we're not just seeing the city, we're seeing it from the point of view of a police drone, which in itself tells you something about the state of the city.
Awesome.
And gives you a little element that you can kind of, identify with as it boats through the destruction of the city in that area.
Awesome. So that's when you get the script from Warren, you're thinking about these things, even though he doesn't explicitly.
Yeah, so in that, he didn't say to do that, but it just felt to me, it felt like we needed a through line to carry us through that from a storytelling place.
That's awesome.
So probably like with movies, a director would get a script and then have to figure out how to shoot that and show that, and people are kind of contributing, to the script in a way to help bring it to life. He's writing it, but I'm the one doing the visuals, and in doing the visuals, sometimes it just needs something that maybe he didn't anticipate when writing the script, or maybe for me, to keep me engaged in the art and the sequence of that story, I just need to add something that I feel the story needs. So.
Gotcha. Want to pause? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, we'll continue.
Come on, there has to be some questions.
Anybody?
What about you? You raised your hand in the back, right? Are you an artist? Yeah, how old are you? What grade are you in? You're 28? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's a compliment.
I don't have my glasses on. So do you draw comics currently? Or
taking classes? MSU?
Awesome.
LCC?
I have my degree in illustration is from Lansing Community College from way back when. So that's awesome. Yeah, and the cool thing about art is, because I worked a day job for several years after college, because I just, couldn't make comics work in a way that made me any money. And to be honest, I wasn't good enough at that time to really do the kind of books that I would need to do. The great thing about art is, say you were in something else, like, because art, to do it commercially is kind of competitive. Like, you kind of have to be good at a certain level to be able to compete, because lots of people want to do it. But if you were doing basketball competitively, you have a small window, and if you're not good enough in that window, it doesn't matter if you're good, if you practice for 10 years, because then you're 35 and your window's over because you're too old for that. The great thing about art is there's no window.
Yeah,
like,
that's a good
no
point.
one's saying, oh, man, if only you were 20. It's like, I didn't meet Robert till I was 30, and most of my comics career has been in my 30s. And in my 20s, I did a lot of graphic design stuff. I did a lot of stuff that was not comics, and I always wanted to be doing comics, and I would do stuff on the side. But there's not a time limit, and especially with the internet, you can put your stuff out there. Nobody knows how old you are. They just know whether it's good or not. And it's really one of the great things with art and comics and writing is this sort of democracy of being able to put your stuff out there, and people will judge it based on the work unless you tell them different. So don't tell them anything that you don't want them to judge you by, and just let them judge the work for the work. And it's really, for me, sometimes I feel like, oh, I've got all this stuff I want to do, and I'm not going to get to this project for a few years. But it's like, well, nobody knows, nobody cares. Like lots of artists that I like, I'm like, oh, I love John Romita Jr. I've loved John Romita Jr.'s art since I was a kid. I don't know how old he is now, but he's not as young as he used to be. His art is still great. I still really like it. I don't care, what stage of his life he's in when he's making that. So it is a very cool thing to be involved in something like this, where you kind of have time to mature as a person and bring, stories I would write now are way different than stories I would have written when I was 25. And, you can bring your sort of life experiences to your artwork and stories and try to, get a little depth and things in that. I don't know. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's some great advice. Thank you. Have you published anything or put anything out there yet? Got feedback? Not yet? Working on it? Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So you dabbled into a little bit about digital.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how you think digital is changing the industry or influencing the industry. What's your take on that these days?
Yeah, for me, it's a tool just like anything else. So it's all about how you use it. So I'm sure, back in the days, the old master painters used to go out in the woods and gather materials to make their own pigments for their own paints.
Yeah.
And that was part of their process. And at some point, a company started making paint, and I'm sure there were lots of old painters who threw their fists in the air and said, if you're not in the woods digging for your own root of something to create,
you're not doing it right.
Yeah, you're not doing it right. But it's like, well, it's a tool, and what matters is the result. And so for me, I have a Cintiq, which is a digital drawing surface.
Oh, cool.
I use lots of software for drawing, and I use lots of traditional methods, and I'm always trying new things. Somebody says, oh, have you tried this pen? No, I'll try it. Oh, have you tried this software? No, I haven't. Let me try it. And it's about, I've got a process now that I really like where I pencil like loosely digitally, so all my initial drawing is done digitally, but then I print that drawing out onto paper, and I do all my finished drawing and inking by hand, because that gives me the kind of hand-drawn lines that I like. And so I've inked some stuff digitally before. I've done a million different variations of that process. And it's just, for me, finding a method that I like the result and then is as efficient as possible. So for me, penciling digitally is way quicker. So I don't want to be pretentious about it. I want to make books. I want to tell stories and make books and have a stack of comics that I worked on. So if I can be quicker by doing something digitally and I still like the look, I'm going to go that route, because I want to tell stories. There are times where for personal art I just want to do a drawing on paper, and I'll just sit down and do it on paper for fun. But I try not to have too many strict rules about it, because for me it's really about the end result.
The output, yeah. That's awesome. So paper is still part of your process, though.
And if you stop by my table, I have originals, and you can see where there's like blue printed underneath from the digital pencils, but then all the finish line work is done by hand.
Yeah, speaking of which, your booth is right around the corner there.
Yep.
Remember what number it is?
Right there.
Like over that way.
Over that wall.
Yeah, you can see the big Jason Howard banner. So stop by and check him out. Buy all his stuff, so he doesn't have to take it home with him, because that stuff is...
It's heavy.
It's heavy, right.
Spread it out.
Help him out. Tools. So I thought that was really, so you work on a Cintiq.
Yep.
What about software? What's your software of choice?
I like penciling with a program called Sketchbook Pro. It's pretty simple, easy to use, and it feels very natural, very much like actually drawing to me. I used Manga Studio in the past.
Very cool.
I've used I use Photoshop for coloring. Sometimes I'll make a 3D model of something in a program called Google SketchUp.
Really?
And use that. So it's just whatever kind of gets the job done and is efficient, to move things along. I'm pretty open to trying anything and seeing how it works in my process. But my main stuff right now is pencil and Sketchbook Pro, color and Photoshop, ink traditionally by hand.
Very, very cool. You guys have to have questions now. Anyone?
What are you reading?
There you go. The question was, what are you reading?
So just this week I read a book called Lake of Fire from Image. The first issue just came out. It's sort of like the Crusades, only if an alien spaceship landed and you're fighting little alien monsters. And so it was really cool. I was like, oh, this is super fun. So I'm really interested to see where that goes. I've been reading a book called Harrow County from Dark Horse or IDW maybe. I don't know who. Yeah, maybe Oni. And it's really good. It's kind of like witches set in like I don't know maybe 1800s at some point, maybe early 1900s in like the backwoods, and this little girl might be a witch or might not be a witch. And
Is that Mark Millar?
No, that's Cullen Bunn writes it, and I'm blanking on the artist's name, which I should remember the artist's name and blank on the writer's name, because who cares about those writers? Like, that's easy. Anybody can put words down. As far as like mainstream, like Marvel DC stuff, I'm trying to think of what I've been digging lately. I tend to buy my friends' books, so I buy Stegman's books and different books that I really like Invincible. I think is a great superhero comic book.
Yeah.
It's a really good read, really great artwork on that.
He's wrapping that one up pretty soon,
Yeah,
right?
they have about a year left. They just announced that. I'm trying to picture what's on my nightstand by my bed. I just read a OGN called The Rattler from Image. It's like a kind of a dark crime story. It was really good. I love the art on that as well. I tend to be drawn to books by the artist, and I tend to read less superhero stuff than I used to, just because they tend to feel like things I've read before a lot of times.
Gotcha.
So I still read a lot of stuff for artwork, but the books that I tend to enjoy tend to be more smaller, like original books by creators.
Yeah. Are there any artists right now that you feel are just you're just crushing it, thinking fantastic work?
Too many. Yeah, I mean James Herron is doing a book for Image called Rumble, and his art is so good. There's an artist, Daniel Warren Johnson. He does a webcomic called Space Mullet. He did a book for Dark Horse called Ghost Fleet, and he has some stuff coming up that looks really great. I mean, I feel like every day I see some artist that I'm like, oh, he's good, and he's like 20.
But there's no window, man.
No window.
There's no window.
Well, that's what I keep telling myself. That doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. There's no window.
Went back searching through my boxes.
Anyone else have questions? Yeah.
I was just wondering what maybe outside of comics you take inspiration from in order to bring into your work.
Sure.
Real quick, the question for everybody: What do you take for inspiration outside of comics to bring into your work?
I like all kinds of artwork stuff, but I also really like history stuff. I really enjoy, learning about history, and I don't get to read as much as I used to. I have 3 kids, so that takes up a lot of my time, but I do listen to podcasts or audiobooks, and I like that kind of stuff. And I really love nature photography, and one of the things I've gotten into even more on trees is because I do a lot of location research, is you go on Flickr and find people upload their vacation photos from all over the place, so you're seeing photos just a whole set of someone who was just there walking around taking pictures. I mean, I feel like if I get sucked into that, I have to be very careful or I'll waste half a day just following someone's trip around a particular city in Europe. But it's well, I might get there someday, I might not, but I'm never going to get to all these different places, and it's really interesting learning about that. And for me, that I have a folder where when I find cool images, I'm like, this city is great, and I'll just grab a bunch of images and put in this folder for story ideas that don't have a place yet, that kind of get matched up in my head. Or if a script is open about a location, I'm like, oh, I've got these pictures from this city that had some cool architecture that I like, and try to incorporate that in, or I'll take it and if it's more of a sci-fi setting, I might not use that city literally, but I'll take elements of the architecture and try to tie it in to give it a little bit more of a grounded look. So anytime I stumble across cool images that I think would be a cool location, I have a folder where I put that stuff for later to try to plug it in somewhere.
Awesome. Good question.
Right.
Anyone else? Questions? Back there, anyone? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the question was original art. Do I have any like original artwork to collect from artists? I do have original artwork, not as much as I would like, because it tends to cost some money and stuff, and I have a wife who keeps an eye on that stuff. But yeah, I have a piece from James Herron, who I mentioned. He actually did a Super Dinosaur piece, which is really great. It's one of my favorites. I have a couple pieces from Cully Hamner, who's is a favorite artist of mine, someone I really like coming up. I have a couple of pieces from Dave Johnson, who's probably my favorite comic book artist, and I have some of his pieces, and then I have art from my friends. Sometimes we'll trade, so I have a few Ryan Otley pieces, Riley Rossimo, trying to think. I have a Tim Bradstreet piece. I don't know if anybody knows who Tim Bradstreet is, but I really like his artwork a lot. So a lot of the art that I have was in that window where I had a day job, but I didn't have kids.
Nah.
And so I was buying artwork because I had money that didn't have to go somewhere as quickly. And so once I quit the day job and started doing comics full time and had kids, suddenly some of the original art kind of took a back seat. So, but hopefully one of these days they'll start contributing financially. Does that happen? Do they ever like start putting in money into the family? Kids? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm on the very early curve of that. I got a 19-month child at home.
Oh yeah.
Just getting started. Speaking
Well,
of,
the day you don't have to buy diapers anymore will be the best day of your life.
please. Speaking of original artwork, you brought some. I saw some at your table, so you can check that out from Jason. Awesome, very cool. Sure to check that out. All right. Anyone else? Questions? Cool. Is there anything you want to tell us what's coming next? I mean, you talked about your...
Yeah, there will be a volume 3 of Trees, and then I have a couple projects that I'm working on that I can't really talk about, but I'm super excited about, which feels like the thing you hear everybody say, so I hate to say it.
Sworn to secrecy.
Oh, this thing I'm doing is great, and it's really part of the problem is by the time a book comes out, I was excited about it 8 months ago, and I'm excited about something else. Well, that one's coming out, so sometimes you have to try to bottle that excitement to save it for when the project is actually coming out.
Long haul.
Yeah, coming out on stands, but it's been fun, and I'll be at my table, so if you want to chat or whatever, come by and stop, or if you just want to look at artwork or look at books or whatever, I won't pressure you into buying anything. Just look around, do whatever is good with me. So.
Fantastic. Awesome. Okay. Well,
thanks for sitting through and coming out.
Yeah,
and joining
thank
the
you.
show.
Real quick, I want to give a shout out to the Comics Community Podcast. You can find us online at www.comics.community. You can also find us on Facebook at Comics Community Podcast. Jason, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, The Jason Howard, Instagram, Jason Howard Art. Those are probably the two main places. I tend to, if I'm super busy, sometimes I forget about social media and the internet, and then when things relax, all of a sudden there will be a couple days where I put a bunch of stuff. Usually on Twitter, I like to show process stuff because that's a thing I like to see from artists.
That's cool.
So, like even this week, I did a couple process pages from Trees where you can see the rough digital layout, the inks, and the colors all kind of side by side. And for people who like that kind of stuff, you can see a little bit more of the behind the scenes, which is, like I said, that's the stuff that I like to see from artists I like, because I'm like, well, I can buy your books and see your finished art. I know what that looks like, but I want to see your pencils or your layouts or that kind of process stuff.
Cool. Well, check them out on Twitter, folks. Jason, thank you for sitting down with us. Thank you for coming to the convention. It's been great talking to you. Everybody, give him a round of applause.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.